Hello, everybody. So I wanted to talk real quickly about Lindsay Clancy and the care that she got. So I'm going to go over the timeline and share some of the things that I would have done if I was her patient advocate. And so the timeline is on January 24th. Lindsay Clancy, who is a labor and delivery nurse in Massachusetts, ended the life of her three children. So this was in on January 24th, 2023. And then she jumped out of the second story window, and now there's an ongoing trial. So, as to the best of my knowledge, this is what we have so far as the timeline of everything happening. So it says Lindsay gives birth to her third child. So on May 26th of 2022. So May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, January. So 8 months later, so she gives birth to the third child, and 8 months later, this happens, right? And so on May 26th of 2022, she gives birth to the third child. In September of that month, so May, June, July, August, September. So 4 months later, she begins experiencing severe postpartum anxiety and starts psychiatric treatment with Astor mental health provider Jennifer Tufts. Over subsequent months, she has prescribed numerous medications. And so, one of the things that it's good to pay attention to is that when somebody goes in for treatment, when somebody goes in for medical care, for mental health care as well, there's paperwork that you fill out, right? And that intake paperwork is where the provider tries to collect as much information as they can, so that they can read over it before they see you sitting in front of them, and things like that. So Dr. Tufts would have gotten some kind of intake paperwork that shows here's what Lindsay was coming to her for. Um, so late December, symptoms worsened with severe insomnia and ideations. She briefly enters a perinatal program and subsequently checks herself out into McLean Hospital on New Year's Eve. So she entered into a maternal program, which is good to hear that there's a maternal program that you can go into. And then from there, she checks herself in to McLean Hospital. I'd like to watch the tapes and find out what was happening at the perinatal program, and see what type of care a person can get. I haven't heard about something like this before, but at McLean Hospital, that's a psychiatric hospital. And generally, when you enter a psychiatric hospital, within 24 hours, um, sometimes it is 48 hours, you get to see a doctor, and then you'd see a doctor, you see a therapist. There are typically nurses on the unit and mental health techs, and everybody's goal is to try to get you to a treatment plan, and then help you to work through that treatment plan while you're there. And the goal is to stabilize. Now, I've heard a lot of people making so much, doing so much about the debates and all this stuff. Look, insurance companies are only going to pay for your stay if when you enter the hospital and you say you're having ideations, right? You can either be having SI or HI, one of those two things, and you can enter into the hospital. Every single day that you're there, you're going to see a doctor, and or you might see a nurse practitioner depending on which state you're in. But the first appointment is typically it's with a doctor, and then next it could be with a nurse practitioner or a doctor again. Now, the doctor is a psychiatrist, and if you know anything about, like, even when you go to like your PCP, right, it's something like 10 minutes, less than even 10 minutes or so, that you sit with that person and you talk to them and things like that. The bulk of mm, information that would be, what's the word, gathered, I don't know if that's the best word, would be through the therapists and the nurses that are on the unit. And so you have to show, if you start to show improvement and various things like that, the other thing, I I'm jumping around, but the other thing is insurance companies usually pay maybe for like 4 days of a stay, and then they want the doctor to do a review. Some insurance companies just give a flat out, like, we'll do 5 to 6 days, and things like that. But some give even less. Some may give only 3 days. And then they expect to read the doctor's notes and see, like, what improvement there has been, if there has been any improvement whatsoever. And then the insurance company will do something called utilization review, and through that utilization review, they'll decide how many more beds, how many more days you get to stay in that bed that you're in, and things like that. So she was admitted to the hospital on New Year's Eve. Um, then on January 5th, she is discharged from the hospital. Her defense contends her mental health state continued to deteriorate, um, and she kept taking various cocktails of medication. By mid-January, records and lawsuit filings note that she reports experiencing hallucinations and intrusive thoughts through instructing her to harm herself and in, instructing her to harm herself and her children. And so one of the things to keep in mind is that she's been discharged from the hospital, and she's going to her provider and she's reporting these things. Now, one of the things I have not heard, and I have not watched everything in the trial, but I haven't heard anybody say whether they told them about leaving her with the kids. Because this is a woman that is struggling with her mental health. She's taking all these medications. She's having all these side effects. She's very vocal about the side effects and things that she's experiencing. But it looks like people are just expecting her to go to her provider, tell the provider these things, get medication, and come home. And then she's supposed to be doing the exact same thing mothers are doing, which is getting the kids ready, feeding them, taking care of dinner, like getting all these things done. And so she's not having a good recovery time period, where she's able to take care of herself and make sure that she's well. And so by mid-January, she's having hallucinations and intrusive thoughts instructing her to harm the children. Somebody should have told that family to remove her or remove the children, one of the two. So either she could go to like her parents' house and stay there away from the children, or the children could go to his parents' house and live with them while she's on the other side. But the children should never have been left in her care, not at all, not at any point in time. And then it says that on January 23rd, she had a 17-minute appointment with her doctor, with Dr. Tufts, reporting increased anxiety and flat mood. Her medication dosage is adjusted. On January 24th, in the morning, the family spent an ordinary day together, including playing outside in the snow. That afternoon, the prosecutors state that Lindsay uses Apple Maps to calculate time travel, and then asks her husband to leave the house and pick up some takeout and medication. And then at 6 to 11 p.m., while he's gone, this is when all of the harming of the children happens. And then at 6:12, she calls 911, her husband, and jumps from the second story window in an attempt, and she severs her spinal cord. She has spinal injuries, and now she's paralyzed, as you can see if you're watching the trial. Patrick returns home to find a quiet house, discovering the children in the basement and finding her injured in the yard. And so the legal proceedings are happening, where she is hospitalized and later transferred to the state health facility while facing charges of first-degree murder. July and August of 2026, That's what when the actual trial is happening. So it's happening right now. And you can see, you can look on, like, there's a Apple podcast. You can look on YouTube and just type in her name, and you'll see all of the people that have been cross-examined, and all of the different, testimonies and things like that. Her husband, Patrick Clancy, has already given his testimony. I think yesterday is when Dr. Tufts was giving her testimony, or was the day before, where they're looking at her notes and the details that she wrote in them to see how she took care of this particular patient. But it is a story that I'm following, and I'm gonna watch everything that's happening in the case, because I mean, it sounds like the couple, like, they reached out for help. They reached out and they reached out and they reached out and they tried everything they could. It sounds like they're a family of means. I mean, just they tried everything they could, and they still couldn't get the help that she needed. The one thing I will say is that I don't think, which I can, you guys let me know if you're watching and you've heard this, but I don't think anybody told them that she should not be alone with the kids. That's the number one thing you tell a family if a mother is postpartum and she says she's having intrusive thoughts about harming herself and her children. That's the first thing you do, is to remove her from the kids. They have to be in separate locations and they cannot be together. So I don't know what was happening, but yeah, I mean, it sounds like nobody told them this particular piece of information, but they, as a family, it sounds like they really, really tried. They tried really, really hard to get her the help that she needed, and it just ended up not being enough. So tell me what you think about this case so far.